Good afternoon, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome to our first session of the new calendar year for the NACDA Social Justice in College Athletics Series. I'm NACDA CEO Bob Vecchione, and I hope all of you are continuing to stay safe and hopefully getting vaccinated very shortly. We're excited to bring you today's discussion on the Black AD Alliance. The creation of the Black AD Alliance was inspired by the importance of promoting more opportunities for Blacks at administrative levels within Division I Athletics Department. Through the leadership of accomplished Black athletics administrators nationally, the Black AD Alliance primary aim is to create growth, development, and elevation opportunities for Black athletics administrators. The Alliance looks to create and develop supportive networks and ways of valuable collaboration amongst professionals in the athletics administration field. This afternoon, we're thrilled to have 5 esteemed athletics directors join us to share in-depth insight into this new organization and how it came to be. Today's session will be moderated by Rice Director of Athletics, Recreation, and Lifetime Fitness, Joe Karlgaard, and he will be joined by Alan Greene, Director of Athletics at Auburn University, Brandon Martin, Vice Chancellor and Director of Athletics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, Candice Storey, Vice Chancellor for Athletics and University Affairs at Vanderbilt University, and Ingrid Wicker McCree, Director of Athletics at North Carolina Central University. Panelists, we're glad to have you with us and appreciate your time taken out of your hectic schedules to be with us today. And before we begin, I'd like to remind you that we want this session to be as interactive as possible. So please, you're all familiar with the chat area of your Zoom screen. Please use that, and Joe will make certain to get as many questions answered as possible. Well, that's all from here. Joe, take it away, and thank you again, all of you, for joining us.
Well, thanks very much, Bob, and very much appreciate all the great work that NACDA's done over the course of the pandemic in facilitating just great discussions on a number of topics for our membership. And in particular, I really appreciate the series on social justice in college athletics. We've got a great group with us today. And, you know, obviously, we're here today to talk about the Black AD Alliance. And so my first question, and I'll direct this to Alan and to Brandon, is what prompted you to form the Alliance? And also, how do you think about the composition of the folks that are within the Black AD Alliance?
Yeah, Joe, I'll go first, and thank you for taking the time, as Bob said, to moderate, and to my colleagues on the call, and to Bob and to Katie, who have been so instrumental in getting this discussion up and off the ground. So speaking of getting discussions up and off the ground, and I'll try to be as brief as I can, but on May 25th, when George Floyd was murdered, I didn't know what to think, what to do. I think most in the Black community, this was not a surprise that a Black man had an unfortunate and a negative ending outcome to an interaction with police. So I can't sit here and say that I was all that surprised by what happened. I think as the week progressed and you saw some of the reactions from the folks in Minneapolis, we had a conversation, when I say we, meaning the Southeastern Conference, and Commissioner Sankey brought this topic up on an AD's meeting. And that's when I knew that something was a little bit different. I was trying to take some vacation, and so I wasn't paying particular attention to the news. On the way back from vacation, I was having a conversation with our football coach at the time, Gus Malzahn, and our men's basketball coach, Bruce Pearl. And I just said, hey, talk to me about what's been going on and what your reactions are. And they said, no, Alan, you got to say something. I'm like, guys, this has happened before and no one's ever said anything before. So why would this time be any different? And as I got to hear them talk about why this was different, it put me in a spot where I was very uncomfortable. And, you know, you've got coaches, your high profile coaches saying that, you know, the athletic director needs to make a statement, let alone a Black athletic director, let alone in the Southeastern Conference, let alone in Alabama. And so I was like, I'm in uncertain and uncharted territory here. I ended up having a conversation with all of our head coaches, almost all of them, and trying to get their input as to how we ought to react or respond to what was happening in Minneapolis. And it became very apparent that, yes, this is different and we needed to make a statement. Being conflicted and confused, dealing with my own personal dynamics of being a Black man in America and also needing to be a leader, I did what most people do, is they call on people who they can rely on. And funny enough, I actually had my oldest daughter, who's almost 16, and my son, who's almost 13. I said, I want you to go through the list of FBS athletic directors and find the Black ones. And I want you to write their names down. So part of it was homework assignment, and part of it was I didn't have all my faculties together. And at the time we had about 6 or so. This was more so at the Power 5 level. And I reached out to them and just said, listen, I'm struggling with what to do and how best to lead. Can we jump on a call, a Zoom, right? And just talk about what's going on. And that was kind of the impetus of what is now a much more formalized organization in the Black AD Alliance. And where we've been meeting, every Wednesday since early June, and have been there for camaraderie, for professional development, just to share some of the challenges, the unique challenges that we face being people of color, and to help us navigate through dynamics that we've never had to navigate through in our leadership, and just be of help and be there for one another. So that is the kind of the quick genesis of how these calls began. And I know Brandon can probably talk a little bit more about how kind of the formalization, the organization came to be.
Sure, Alan. Thank you for that. And I want to begin, as Alan did, just thanking Bob and thanking Katie, and also thanking Joe for your time today, moderating this critical panel. Our goal simply is to create a pipeline of senior level Black administrators at the Division I level. One of the things we've done that's been really good is we've comprised a executive committee of 16 well-accomplished athletic administrators throughout the country that is a part of the Black AD Alliance. We took it a step further and actually organized subcommittees. And one of our subcommittees is the pipeline that's spearheaded by individuals like Lee Reed at Georgetown and Tim Duncan down at New Orleans. But also we have other subcommittees. We have an ally group that kudos to Bernard Muir, who has done a terrific job with providing opportunities for allies to come in and see how they can help our mission, how they can promote some of our goals, some of our aims, some of the things that we want to get accomplished. We also have a student athlete welfare committee that's been really governed by Dr. Ed Scott, and he's done a terrific job with that. And we also have a race and social justice committee that was initially spearheaded by Tamika Smith-Jones, and now that's been transferred to other members, within that subcommittee. Lastly, we do have an ambassador group, which we're really proud of. That's comprised of members like Gene Smith, like Peter Roby. We do have Earl Edwards and Dr. Daryl Gross, who has a wealth of intercollegiate athletic experience. And so we're really proud of that. And so I want to conclude this statement by saying that if we think about the genesis and we think about answering the why of the Black AD Alliance, there's alarm at the gate right now. And this is the opportune time for us to really take a stand and really talk about people within the intercollegiate athletic structure who are qualified, who are prepared for opportunities, and how can we get organized and how can we get structured to prepare them for opportunities. The other piece is that we can't do this alone. We can't do this alone. And so one of our missions is to work with the NC2A senior officials, to work with conference commissioners, to work with select ADs who might have influence in helping our mission. And so it's been delightful to work with my colleagues up to this point, and I'm excited about the potential of where we can go.
Thanks, guys. My next question, I'm going to direct it at Ingrid. And, as we think about Division I, it's very broad, over 350 institutions represented. Some play football, those that do play football at different levels. Ingrid, you're at an HBCU. Can you talk a little bit about how you get all of those different voices in the room to represent Division I? And are there any unique challenges that you see from your vantage point?
Thank you. And again, as everyone has stated, thank you so much for this opportunity. Brandon talked about the task force that we have within the Alliance. And so one of them is the HVC Task Force. And so I was very happy and excited when Alan asked for me to serve as the chair of that task force. And I think one of our goals is to heighten the awareness of our HBCU institutions in all of NCAA, but specifically Division I. There's 23 in Division I. And I think that we want to try to dispel those myths about what it's like to work at an HBCU, what is the student athlete experience at HBCU. And most people think that everyone knows, and especially people of color, they know all about HBCUs. That's just not the case. Believe it or not, throughout my 29 years, there were some individuals on this task, on the Alliance, that I had never met, but people always make that assumption. So one of the things is first to make sure all of us in the Alliance understand what we do at our HBCU, so that now there's a greater understanding before we even reach out outwardly. Another thing is how do we really make sure that the student athlete experience at our HBCU is told. I looked at a panel last night of the Black Leadership and the, I believe, Black Leadership Association for Athletes, Administrators, and Coaches. And it was a panel of former HBCU student athletes telling their stories about their experiences. And so certainly our task force can look at that as a platform moving forward to share those experiences. Some of the challenges on the task force, I remember one member saying specifically, is that HBCUs often go overlooked or an afterthought when looking at candidates for jobs across the NCAA. And so, specifically, he said that, anytime initiatives are developed, opinions are asked and information is needed, HBCUs are sometimes not at the table. And so, again, that is a motivating factor for the members of the task force to see how we can change that. And lastly, as Brandon talked about and Alan, in terms of engaging allies, there are other higher ed organizations, the Black Congressional Caucus, Thurgood Marshall Foundation. So how can we leverage through our contacts on this committee or the Alliance to reach out to them to help make sure that they understand and can help us advocate for HBCU athletic programs within the academy. And so it's very, very important to me because all of my career, basically, except for 2 years, has been in an HBCU. And I'm really proud that that is a part of this alliance so that we can make sure, especially during this time in our society, to really encourage our young people and just people in the industry to take advantage of job opportunities at HBCUs as well.
I want to piggyback on something you referenced, Ingrid, and that's that you spent the bulk of your career at North Carolina Central. And, as I went through and researched a little bit more of all of your backgrounds, it's interesting. You've got, Alan and Brandon have worked at multiple institutions. Candice, you've come up through Vanderbilt. Ingrid, you got your start in coaching. And what occurred to me as I was reading all these different backgrounds is that there's talent in a lot of different places that sometimes goes unrecognized or untapped. And so Candice, I'm going to ask you, what are the specific discussions that you all have had as an alliance about identifying and developing that talent pipeline?
Thank you, Joe. And like my colleagues, I want to say thank you too for the opportunity. I appreciate it. I would say, I want to borrow words that Ingrid just said about dispelling myths, because I do think that that is a motivating factor for us. You know, I think part of what I hope that people are learning is that, much like you said, Joe, there's an incredible wealth of talent that's out there. You know, everybody has not had the same level of exposure. Sometimes we're very narrow in how we define pedigree or how we define preparation. And I think that part of our purpose is to show that you need only look and be interested and intentional, and you'll find that there are Black administrators out there that can do amazing work and that are highly qualified and be wonderful representatives at a number of different institutions. I have been probably naive. I think I'm the newest AD in this group, but a little bit naive I have been about, as you start to talk about diversity and a commitment to diversity, like some people equate that to lowering standards and lowering quality. And I think that our group is very clear that that is not the case. And so we're all uniquely qualified, right, to understand what it is to be Black in this space. And part of the responsibility, one, we're not just trying to survive, but we're trying to thrive. And so the sense of community and support from one another is, you know, cannot be understated. But also the responsibility as you sit at the table, whatever the table is, you then have the opportunity to affect change and bring other people along. And there are other people like us. And I think that, you know, that's sort of the crux of the conversations that we've been having.
Brandon, I know earlier in our discussion, we talked about that. Do you have anything to add on specific conversations that you guys have had about pipeline development?
Yeah, I just want to maybe just comment on what Candice just mentioned in terms of the number of people who we have just like us. And I want to debunk the stereotypes and the myths that exist in our industry of people who are not qualified, people who are not prepared for a position. We know that there's individuals who are talented who might need a level of education or some level of training. But we have a huge pipeline nationally that is prepared for opportunities. But I think there's two words that we really strongly need to consider. One is that we need to be intentional about this effort, about creating this pipeline. And then there's a level of courage that's needed in order to do this. And so I can't applaud my colleagues enough in the Black AD Alliance for the work that we've done up to this point. But I do think that it's going to be an effort where we can't do it alone. The Black AD Alliance can't do it alone. I think that this is an opportunity for us to perhaps build some type of synergies with other organizations who have existed even beyond us. You know, when you look at MOA, when you look at what Sean in China has done with Lead One, you know, I think we're all trying to get to the same place. And I just want to offer this opportunity to put a plug into the white paper that was published maybe a month ago, 3 weeks ago, whenever it was. I thought that group did an outstanding job of you know, offering some solutions to how we can move forward. But we're all trying to get to the same place. But I think we need to find additional points of commonality as we continue to move forward towards this effort.
I just want to remind everybody that if you have a question during our discussion, please use the Q&A feature on your Zoom. We have 4 or 5 questions that have popped in, and we'll get to those toward the end of our webinar today. Alan, I want to pivot a little bit to you to talk about how you're interacting with student athletes. Since the killing of George Floyd, we've seen a number of student athletes become more active and really find their voice. And so my question for you is the group thinking about or doing anything specifically to support those student athletes that want to make sure that their voices are heard?
Yeah, Joe, that's an excellent point. There's a number of different ways that this response can go. So I'll try to tackle one. And if colleagues have a different response, please feel free to add your remarks. First and foremost, and we've had these conversations, is that we are, as leaders of athletics departments, we are here to serve all student athletes. It just so happens that we're Black. It just so happens that we have a better understanding of what a Black student athlete is going through, particularly those in leadership positions who have been former student athletes. And I think part of, and I can speak for me, is this balance of trying to your point, Joe, is help them find their voice, but also understand that just because they can doesn't mean they should. And just because they want to doesn't mean it's good. And so really trying to help our young people understand what is it that you're trying, what's the end game? What are you trying to accomplish? And then let's work our way back and think about what is the most appropriate action or actions to help get your point across. And I think sometimes our young people will see professional athletes doing something, whatever that may be, or see other community members doing something and think that that fits for them. But we really have to challenge our young people, and all of us, even as adults, have to challenge ourselves to answer that question of our why. Our women's soccer coach, Karen Hoppe, did a fantastic job of making all her student athletes write out, what's your why, right? So if you're going to take a knee during the national anthem, then why? And I need to understand that. We all need to understand what your why is. So she used that as a platform to better educate her student athletes and her coaches to be able to have a more productive conversation about how they were feeling. So that would be one way I would talk about some interaction with some student athletes. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Where we have had lots of discussions, right? Because I've had these discussions with our executive team, white males, white females, Black females, so that we can ping these things off of one another, right? And try to figure out, are we approaching this thing in a way that is the most appropriate? And one of the things that we settled on was our responsibility as leaders is to help our young people along their journey. This journey through life, this journey through social injustice, this journey through politics, this journey through sexual orientation, whatever it is, we are there to help them through their journey. We are agnostic in what it is that they want to do per se. Like, we're not taking political statements or positions, but to try to help them through and understand, if you do something now, what impact is that going to have? Positive and negative, and let's figure out if that's really what it is that you want to do. Is that really the signal that you're trying to send?
So can I just add to that? Another thing in terms of this engagement, very empowering, very refreshing. While the assumption may be that our all like all one thing.
Ingrid, I'm not sure your microphone is working.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little bit better, but it seems the volume seems a little low. If you could turn it up.
Okay, what about now?
This is better. If you could start your answer again, please.
I'm sorry. I was saying that the exchange of ideas and experiences is very refreshing amongst the Alliance when we meet on Wednesday nights. And another thing is in terms of lifelong learning, even for us. And the assumptions may be that, during the Black Lives Matter and movement and now, that we knew everything about it so that we can share with our student athletes and coaches. And that's not just the case. And so I believe Tamika was able to bring in a speaker, Dr. Melina Abdullah. who is with the Black Lives Matter movement, and for her to give us a historical perspective of the movement, how it started, that only enabled us to take that information and really now be able to look at and help our student athletes and coaches more. So this alliance is not just, us trying to promote ourselves.
Candice or Brandon, have you had any conversations with coaches about how you intend the organization to interact with coaches and try to support your mission as well?
Sure, Joe. One of the things that I launched back in the summer of 2020 was we started a RISE program for our coaches, and it was all geared to find a special place for the coaches to express some of their innermost fears, some of their thoughts, some of their opinions, especially as the social justice pieces were escalating. And we've had opportunities to have constructive discourse with coaches and with student athletes from that time. I do want to take, I want to extend what Alan did. He gave a great response, and I do want to extend from that and just talk about what this is as it relates to student athletes. I think more than ever, this is a time where our student athletes have a platform. This is the chance where they have more of a voice. And historically, if you go back to, I think it was 1969, where you had Fred Milton back at Oregon, where he had issues related, to issues with his coach as related to protest. We all know that the efforts that Harry Edwards made at San Jose State University back in 1969. But I think as we think about the present day student athlete, I think we have to first, and Alan alluded to this, one of the first things that I've really charged student athletes is you have to clarify your purpose, which goes to answering the why that Alan talked about. Why are you having a voice? Why are you taking certain actions? And truly understanding that. What are the barriers beyond that? And those barriers simply are within themselves. They have the platform, they have the voice, they have the leverage. And that would be number two. And then three, it would be measuring their conviction. I mean, how many pioneers have we had throughout the history who've talked about activism and talked about having a voice, and they had 2 feet in. And so one of the things that I've encouraged student athletes to do is to answer the why, but if you're going to do it, have 2 feet in, but it has to be constructive. Okay, it can't just be emotional. Okay, it has to be constructive. And if it's constructive for the betterment of the student athlete demographic, and it's constructive for the athletic department and constructive for the university community at large, I'm fully supportive of that. But just to have an opinion, just to have it, that's really not moving us to where we want to be.
We began the conversation talking about the composition of the alliance, and I think we recognize that among the number of Black ADs that exist in Division I, most of them are men. So, Candice, I want to ask you, how do you think about providing additional support for women in the alliance, and then thinking too about maybe extra efforts on pipeline development?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that there are layers to this. So you put all the Black ADs together, there are still different layers. The context is different, right? Where we're from, what our backgrounds are. Certainly gender does add another perspective. You know, there are things like Ingrid and I met Ingrid once this Black AD Alliance started, and now, I mean, she is tremendous. And I know that there are things that I can talk with her about, that Alan is my guy and we're always together, but there's, you know, there are things that Ingrid may understand in a different way, or, you know, or there may be things I can go to Brandon about that. You know, my point is that it's nuanced, but I do think that it's important that we recognize that there is a different perspective as a Black woman sitting at the table than as compared to a Black man. And I think that it's, you know, I think it's, we're trying to be savvy enough to understand that while there are differences, they need not divide us. It's just that we're trying to figure out how can you best prepare someone to navigate the unique challenges that come from being who you are. And, you know, Alan talked about his response after George Floyd was murdered and being a Black man in this league in the state of Alabama. You know, that's a unique set of circumstances that influences how he perceives things. I could, you know, say the same thing as a Black woman in Nashville. I'm at my alma mater and still am dealing with some of the challenges that come with being Black and being a woman in this space. And so, it is unique. And I just think that we need to be intentional about providing like additional support. And I think that we're certainly being deliberate as we plan forward and taking that into consideration.
Ingrid, do you have anything to add?
Can you hear me now? Better? Okay. I just remember the day that Tim Duncan, who's at UNO, called me or texted me and said, okay, Ingrid, you have to join this call. And I said, well, who's the call with? And he says, well, some Black D1 ADs. And I said, well, I'm a Black D1 AD. Why didn't I get the invite from the beginning? And so I guess my ego got involved and I didn't join the first time, but then the second time I did. And, you know, for women, there are and for Black administrators, there's so many organizations and programs that are designed to help us in the pipeline. And sometimes where's the evidence of that? You know, it's only 9, I believe, or 10 of us in Division 1, and most of us are at HBCUs. And so the hesitancy and the skepticism was there just because as a Black woman in this industry, we've had to work so hard. And I'm not taking away from our counterparts, but it is a different experience. And so I remember reaching out to Alan and sharing with him my concerns, because I think the first call I didn't say one word, and I probably had the side eye looking like, well, what's going on? You know, what are they all about? But he called me back and he explained to me that he heard my concerns as a Black female in this business, and he invited me to serve on the executive committee. And I said at that point that this group is serious about inclusiveness, even amongst our own. And I will say that we are determined, we are being very intentional to make a way, a pathway for others. And so I definitely think that the additional support, and we're going to be very resourceful for other Black women in this industry.
So we have nearly 200 people on the webinar today, and happy to have everybody who's listening. I'm sure the question on most people's minds is, how can I be involved? What if I'm not a Black athletics administrator? How might I be involved? And I will just say that I have been asked and agreed to be an ally to this group. When I think about being an ally, it starts with education and listening, but it also means being an advocate and being answering the call when the Black AD Alliance needs something from me or needs me to fill a role. So this is for anyone. What advice would you give to the people on the webinar today on how they can become involved and be supportive of this group?
Brandon is going to unmute first, right?
Joe, I think that's a terrific question. And, I think just first, I would like to say that it would be good for whoever's interested in supporting our mission and our goals and what we're trying to get done. It's simple to contact myself or Alan as the two co-chairs. But I would also like to have our list of executive committee members, have them have an opportunity to engage with folks who have interest. We have 4 or 5 subcommittees who, still need to be populated with individuals who have input, who want to help our cause, who want to get involved. And so, what I would like to do is maybe put together some sort of, one pager where we have contact information for everyone at the leadership level, at the top level, where folks can have access to and reach out.
Yeah, Joe, I'll add just a nugget here. There's formal avenues and then there's informal avenues, right? And I think it's important that we all recognize that we use both. And so let's remove race, let's remove gender from the discussion and just think about how we would talk to other professionals in this industry who aspire to do more, to be more. They're going to seek out people on their own to say, hey, can you be a mentor? Can you provide guidance? When you add back in race and gender to these discussions, it requires an additional level of consciousness and intentionality where you're being more thoughtful with who it is that you're trying to connect with and why you're trying to do it. And so, as you think about those who are on this call now, those who will listen later, you've got people of color, you've got Blacks and African Americans by and large who are saying, well, how can the Alliance be of help to me? And then you may have, non-Blacks who are saying, well, how can I help advance the mission and the purpose of increasing diversity? And that all has to operate in an ecosystem. And so depending on where you're coming from, I do think I think where you're coming from has implications or is impacted by what it is that you're trying to accomplish and what methods to get to achieve ways to help, right? So for Joe, for someone like you, it may be being a mentor to a young Black man or woman who wants to learn more about how to be an AD, right? And for, I'm picking a name, Sandy Barber, right, who has offered to be an ally. There may be a young woman, a young Ingrid or a young Candice out there who wants to know what it's like to be a woman AD at the Power 5 level. So I think there's many, as Candice had mentioned, there's many levels and layers to this thing that we all have to just be more thoughtful about as we navigate our way through.
You guys have any short-term plans for a website or any social media presence?
Joe, I would say we do. We've had extensive conversations with executive committee members as well as other folks who can sort of augment to what we're trying to get done. And we're hoping to have that up and running here in the next 3 to 4 weeks, because we know that that's really critical, as we continue to elevate what we're trying to do, not only elevate, but just communicate our goals, communicate what we're trying to get done, and celebrate some of the successes of folks within the pipeline. I think that's extremely critical. So expect that to be up and running here in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
All right, we've got a number of questions in the Q&A, and just a reminder, if you have a question, please use the Q&A function on your Zoom, and I'll get to as many of them as I can with the time that we have remaining. I'm gonna ask a question here that was posed early on in the session today. We have a number of organizations that work to advocate for administrators, whether they are ADs or senior level or entry level administrators in a number of different silos. You obviously have NACDA, we've got MOA, we've got Lead One, you've got Women Leaders in College Sports, we have the Black AD Alliance. The question is, are there any plans to expand this to Division II and Division III, and why the specific focus on Black ADs?
I'll take a shot at that, Joe. As we began to form this group, there were lots of conversations about what are we trying to accomplish, and there's uniquenesses to each of our levels, even in Division I. And it's been great to have conversations with other colleagues who expose bias, right? And so sitting at the Autonomy 5 level, I come to these conversations with a very different view than an Ingrid will. And it's great to be able to have those discussions. And so even within Division I, there's a lot of room in this box. I think when and we were very intentional that we wanted to keep it Division I because of all those uniquenesses until we had a chance to get ourselves together and see where this thing is going. And so what would be awesome, and this is Alan Greene's opinion, no one else's, is there's nothing preventing D2, D3, NAIA, whatever, of getting together, right? This group of talented individuals occurred very organically. And so there needs to be additional conversations with groups in different levels and other minoritized groups to be able to really do the same thing and get together and have conversations that are unique to some of the experiences that other leaders are going through. So where does it go? I don't think any of us know, but I think what we do recognize and can appreciate and want to happen is that this helps increase discussion around diversity in our industry, and not just the value of diversity or the need for diversity, but the importance and the positive impact and the better teams are when there are more diverse people involved.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions here. One is, how should senior level administrators interact with this group? And I know, Brandon, it was you or Alan referenced reaching out to either of you as the co-chairs of this group. But also, how will the Black AD Alliance be a resource for aspiring ADs? And I think, interestingly here, is there any plan to partner with search firms?
Sure, Joe. I think that's an excellent question. One of our goals is to have select search firms, come to our meetings. We have virtual meetings typically every Wednesday. And, and that's a range from conference commissioners to our ally group. And, one of the things we want to have a very thorough, extensive conversation is with search firms, and to really talk about how can we, have the folks that we are grooming within that pipeline, how can we engage them and have a connection and a relationship with those search firms. And so that's definitely in our goals in the first and second quarter of the year. And so I think that's extremely critical, because if the search firms are not familiar with the up and coming folks within the pipeline, then, we won't have the outcomes that we want to see. I do want to dovetail off of Alan's response, and I think Alan's response was more than appropriate, and I think we can see that that's why he's one of the top athletic administrators nationally. But I have a different take. I think, when you talk about, why is this, just focused on Blacks. I think if you look at the overrepresentation of, African-American student athletes that participate in the revenue sports, and you have the underrepresentation of athletic administrators, that's problematic. That's problematic. And so that's one of the main things. When you look at the number in football, I think it's close to 50. It might be 48. When you look at college basketball, it's over 50. I think it's maybe 53%, that we're looking at. And so that's more of a reason why we need a focus on that. If we have African Americans who are really in those two sports, we need more representation. And when do those conversations happen? And so if we were to talk about coaches, that's a whole different conversation. But we're talking about administrators. We're talking about deputy ADs. We're talking about athletic directors at that level who can serve not only in title, but can serve as mentors, who can serve as guides, who can serve as multiple roles as a big brother, and serve in that role that I believe is the true mission and the tenets of higher education and what this is all about.
Another question from the audience here. And again, I'll throw this open to any of you who would like to answer. How do you all handle situations such as the George Floyd situation when a majority of your student athletes are white? And so maybe another way to think about this, if that's not particularly true, maybe thinking about specific teams where the majority of your student athletes are white.
Well, I'll share just from our experience. About 23% of our student athlete population are white student athletes or non-Black. And so certainly that was a challenge for some of the coaches who have, really never had to deal with or address those type of issues with just their team in general. And so we were able to provide, I'm big on education and lifelong learning. And so we immediately made sure that we provided information for all of our coaches with regards to understanding how to communicate. We had a session with Jen Fry, and that was amazing with understanding aspects of social justice and microaggressive behavior and things like that. So what we did mostly was to make sure that the coaches were comfortable as they could be, and gave them some tips and resources to use in addressing all their student athletes. And I do have a certain, small number of white head coaches of our teams. And so they're in a different space. And so not only talking with the coaches, but also our student athletes to make sure they understand there are different points of views, and we have to have empathy. And I think empathy was the one word that I have been stressing and has been the theme ever since the George Floyd incident. And so that's kind of what we've done. And then again, most people don't think about diversity when they think about HBCUs in terms of white student athletes, but the majority of us are probably about 26% when I was looking at the NCAA data from 2019. And so that's what we've done.
Do you have any specific recommendations on how to be more intentional in diversifying the talent pool when hiring for coaching and administrative positions, people to connect with, places to post, or processes in general?
I'd say, I'll just jump in really quick. I'd say one of the things that my staff and I are doing, I think it's human nature that when it comes time to fill a position, you go to who you know. You fall into like old habits, and that certainly depending on the position, you feel pressure, you're trying to hurry, that is probably not the best time to try to form new habits, right? So what I've talked to our staff about is being really intentional when we don't have a vacancy to build relationships, to be very deliberate about reaching out to, in particular, like search firms other than the ones we always use. And that's certainly no disrespect to the ones we always use. There's one I always use, right? To date, use the same one. And certainly we'll continue to use them in different ways, but I'm like, this is the time where we start to build relationships with Black search firms and be intentional about going to other groups, because if we can lay the foundation when the next vacancy happens, and we rely on who we know and where we've built connections, if we've been intentional about making those connections diverse, and of course also it's also about just modeling and being very clear about, we're not going to say one thing and do another. But the reality is that you have to work on that every single day. So I think that, it's maybe the greatest fear on my part as we start to get revved up about diversity work is getting to this pinnacle and everybody's engaged, and then it slowly starts to drop off because we get busy with other things. I think the key is trying to keep it at a heightened level all the time. So hopefully it drives behavior. Easier said than done, but that's certainly what we're working on.
And I would like to add also too, outside the realm of athletics and search firms, but even on your campuses, being intentional about meeting those deans, those associate VCs and vice chancellors, because they're going to be chancellors one day. And so they're going to build their Rolodex. They're starting right now. And so it is very important that you're intentional about your network and making sure it's not just exclusive to athletics, but it is broad across the campus and across the community.
I think, Joe, I think first, and I think Ingrid and Candice had some very excellent points, but I think we have to go back to the why, and the why is that only 8.8% of us at the FBS level comprise the positions. Okay, so let's start from there. And then number two, I do agree with Ingrid's point in terms of we have to have a multi-pronged approach. And that approach is that we have to involve conference commissioners. We have to involve search firms. We have to involve chancellors and college presidents and also senior level administrators at the NC2A level in having these discussions. And so I think that's critically important as we move along. And there's still a great deal of work to be done.
Another question from the audience here. What kind of skills should up and coming people of color add to their repertoire? How should they be navigating their journey from whatever their area of expertise is?
I'll offer some insights or try. I think the skill set is independent of skin color or gender. There may be some nuances because of the way people perceive certain people, but by and large, leadership comes in many different forms. You do tend to see in our industry more people who are servant leaders and more people who are really intentional about helping other people be successful. And so as you're building your skill set, think about the people who you look up to in the industry and what are some of the habits that they do. And then think about some of the folks in the industry who you may not look up to, and what are the habits that they do, right? So some of it's process of elimination, and some of it is process of adding to your repertoire. I know that's not like you need to do this, and this, but by and large, that's a big bucket of servant leadership that I would recommend people adopt.
I think Joe, it's all about, how do you manage the number of stakeholders that are involved in our positions? And there's numerous. But there's a conversation, that I've had and with other folks, and it's where, you have to learn how to play chess and not checkers. And at our level, we always have to be in a chess playing type mode. And so it's very easily to say, well, yeah, you know, you got to get external relations, fundraising type of experience, and that's great, you know, but it really comes down to a matter of trust. Does that chancellor, does that president trust you to be the face of the athletic department? And what does all of that entail? I think those are some of the skills that, you know, that are going to be looked at very strongly.
I recognize we're running up against the top of the hour. So I think to conclude the webinar today, I'm going to throw it back to the panelists to offer any final thoughts or words of wisdom. And I'll just go on my screen. Candice, I'll start with you. You know, anything you want to finish with here as we wrap things up?
I think just a couple things. One, I want to publicly commend Alan and Brandon. They've been great leaders for this organization. And I really appreciate you forcing us to be intentional about something that's important to all of us, and really setting a tremendous example and making it worthwhile and making us feel like we're going to affect change and be transformational. And that's particularly as someone who's only been in the seat for a short time, that's very, very inspiring to me. And I appreciate that. And the second thing I would say, just, you know, around the sentiment of why Division I and why just this and why that, I just want to say, like, sort of in defense of my colleagues, that, you know, if you get too big, then you don't get things done. And this group is so serious, I can't convey that enough, serious about affecting change. And if you take, all of us are, you know, we've all worked really hard to get where we are. So we know how to take a bunch of things and probably say yes more than we should. And they have forced us to be narrow in our thought so that we can make sure that this, like, the foundation is set, and that at the appropriate time, we can take on more to help everybody on this call and beyond. And so I felt the need to say that, because this is some hard work. You know, if it could change overnight, we wouldn't have to have the alliance. All of the things that we're competing against, this is some hard work. And so we started small intentionally, but I look forward to the day when it blossoms, because I know it will. But we're going to need everyone's help. But just try not to begrudge us being focused, because I think that's really important.
Ingrid, final thoughts?
So now, Alan, we know Candice has a lot to say on the calls from now moving forward, but I would just is to be present. My mom always talks about being present. I will say this group is present. And so in everything that you do, stay focused and be present with everything that's going on around you to be the best person and the best administrator you can be.
Alan?
Yeah, I don't like having to follow those folks. Ingrid and Candice, and, you know, Carla's not on this panel, but she's on the call as well. And I try to speak from my heart an awful lot. And Candice and Carla in particular, because I interact with them a great deal, is I try to get them to speak up more, because what they have to say, people. And I think that plays into a little bit about the gender dynamics in our industry, not just race, but just the fact that it's a male dominated industry. But there are a number of females out there who have things to contribute. And I would encourage the women to contribute, because your voice needs to be heard. The last thing I'll say is, and this is really more for the listeners, take your career in your own hands, right? Don't wait for those of us in leadership roles per se to reach out to you. There are a number of leaders in this industry who want to give back. The Black AD Alliance for us is a passion. It's not our day job. We spend lots of time on our day job and have to carve out time for this. So some of us on the call are inundated with requests for mentorship, but just know that there are many ways to receive mentorship from many other people. And it doesn't, regardless of skin color, regardless of gender, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of level 1, 2, or 3, find someone and find people who can help you grow, who can help you develop. And don't worry about being so targeted with a particular person who sits in a particular role at a particular institution and at a particular level. There's lots to learn. And Ingrid, she talked about lifelong learning. We all continue to learn and just look forward to Candice's point of watching this thing grow and evolve and ultimately just have an impact on our industry. That's really important personally to me, is having an impact on our industry. Joe, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alan. Brandon, we'll let you wrap.
Yeah, Joe, I appreciate all of my colleagues' comments, and Alan is great, and we know he has a career in politics, and he's really good in a lot of things that he said. But I'm going to say it a little different. Okay, I want to debunk the myth, that Black athletic administrators are not prepared and they're not able to compete for jobs, and that goes beyond entitlement. Okay, and I want to just make that point known, and I also want to say that if there's anyone who is very serious about joining and collaborating with us as a Black AD Alliance, then let's get it done. We've been on this call for an hour. I think we've said a lot of salient things that will advance our cause. But if you're really serious about really trying to help us, then let's get on board and let's really come together and let's try and build this pipeline that we all know that we need to build to add to our industry. So, Joe, I can't thank you enough for what you've done today. Really appreciate that. Thank you for everyone who tuned in today, and thank you for my colleagues who joined the call. So thank you very much.
Joe, can I apologize to you and Bob and Katie for offering one more remark? And I want to do this because I know this is being recorded, and I want this statement to live and have some life to it. As our industry begins to change, and as social injustice and as race and gender become part of the future of our industry, it makes perfect sense for us to have diverse leaders guiding the way for our student athletes who are broad in who they are. Having people of color, Black, Latino, or Latinx, I guess, whatever, women, various sexual orientations, is incredibly valuable because of the diverse student athletes who we serve, the coaches and staff who we serve. It is critically important that we as an industry work to increase diversity so that we can have a better industry and that we can leave it better than we found it. Thank you.
Perfect way to wrap up the call, Alan. Alan, Brandon, Ingrid, and Candice, really appreciate your time today. Appreciate our audience hanging in there with us a little bit past the top of the hour, and appreciate you all having me moderate this discussion. It's been a pleasure, and I'll kick it back over to Bob to close us up today.
Thanks, Joe. Great job. And panelists, exceptional. A couple things, you said communication is the key, and it really is, both internally and externally. Candice said something really interesting and prophetic. It's navigate the unique circumstances of being who you are. Very important. All of you, your passion is incredible. I know this is going to succeed. There are a lot of us out there who want to assist you in that endeavor. So I look forward to working with each of you. And again, thank you all for your participation. We look forward to many more of these conversations going forward. And as we all sign off on this call, please be safe in this crazy environment out there. And I hope to see you all soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.